All right, this is going to be a good one. We're going to talk about free mastering plugins. Now, I'm not going to show you some low quality plugins. I actually work with some of these plugins on a regular basis. And I'm going to add that most of them shouldn't even be free, if you want my opinion. And one of them was supposed to be free for only a limited time when it came out 2 years ago. And it's still free, so stick around for this one. Enough talking, let's jump right in and look at plugin number one. One of the most important tools when it comes to mastering is a good EQ. Now, if you have CUBASE Pro, fortunately enough, we have a plugin called Frequency 2, which is a more than a complete EQ to work with while mixing and especially while mastering. And this is what we have with the Frequency. It has 8 bands to work with. Every band will have 3 modes: stereo mode, left and right, if you want to EQ the left apart from the right, and MS mode, which is very useful in mastering, where we're able to EQ the center apart from the sides or vice versa, which is very useful when mastering. On top of that, every band has dynamic EQ, which is also super cool to work with when mastering music. And this is going to allow you to compress a band of frequencies only instead of the full range with a regular compressor. So if you have like lots of energy going on the low mids, for example, but you don't want to cut the low mid entirely, but you just dynamically want to tame that region down, a dynamic EQ is gonna do the trick. You select your band, you activate dynamic EQ right here on the top right, and you can switch the view mode to the compressor mode, where you'll have access to all the parameters a compressor has. And again, it's only for that one band of frequencies you are working on, which is great. It also has an internal sidechain option that you can use on every single band. Okay, so this makes this EQ very powerful. Now, if you don't have CUBASE Pro, no worries. I have a couple of EQs for you. The first one is called NOVA by TDR, which stands for Tokyo Dawn Records, if I'm not mistaken. This is a 4-band EQ that also has a compressor on each band, which makes it a very cool dynamic EQ to work with if you don't have access to frequency out of CUBASE Pro. So very simple to work with. You select your band by activating threshold. You'll be able to start using this EQ as a dynamic EQ on the band you have selected. So if you want a free EQ plugin that will support MS mode and even more, the one I have for you is by iZotope, and it's the Ozone 11 equalizer. Again, totally free. It's a very nice mastering type EQ, and it works pretty well. You can add a bunch of bands, so that gives you lots of flexibility. You can use the EQ in stereo as it is right now, as long as your EQ is on a stereo channel, and you have access to mid-side processing, left and right, and also transient and sustain if you want to add a different EQ to the transient of the sound or to the sustain of the sound independently from each other. That can be interesting. I never used that on my side yet in a mastering session, but I guess it can be useful. Now, the only thing is that the full plugin will work in that specific mode you select. So if I select mid-side processing, now all the EQ bands within the EQ are gonna work in mid-side processing, okay? So I'll be able to switch from mid to side and just tweak things around if I want to EQ the sides or the work I need to do on the center of the signal. So this is how you'll be able to use this plugin. Now, this EQ doesn't have a dynamic side to it, so if you want to use a dynamic EQ again, you can download the NOVA by TDR and use this in combination with the iZotope Ozone 11 equalizer, and you have the best of both worlds. Compression can be very useful when mastering. It's not something that I use on all masters. Lots of mixes are already fully compressed and lots of mixers use compression on the mix bus, like I do anyways. So when it comes to mastering my own music, I don't reach to a compressor a lot. But when I do, I want the compressor to be as transparent as possible. And one of my favorite compressors when it comes to mastering is totally free. Yeah, and you probably saw this one before. And like the Nova EQ, it's made by TDR, and it's called the Kotelnikov Mastering Compressor. It's not that complicated to use, but at the same time, it has some advanced features. Like, for example, there's the attack and release, but the release has a peak mode release and also a RMS release. Now, I'm not going to dive into this in this video, but it gives you just a bit more flexibility when it comes to the release time. So if you start diving into this compressor, you'll see right away that it's a complete mastering compressor. And I kind of like how it sounds for a full band compressor. Let's have a listen. So if I need a compressor on a master, chances are I'm gonna start with this guy. Now the next one on the list has to do with stereo imaging. Now, stereo imaging is a tool very useful in mastering, not necessarily on all masters, but sometimes I just like to add a bit more width to a master. But I want to keep that stereo spread as transparent as possible. So I need a very good stereo imager to achieve that. And one of the plugins on my list, and this one is also 100% free, is the Ozone Imager. And again, I'm very gentle when it comes to imaging. I just add maybe 10, 12, maximum 15%, and I'm good to go. So I kind of like it, so you can hear it right away. It's a bit more wide when I have the plugin engaged, and it still sounds natural, and this is something I like about this plugin. But again, when working with stereo imagers on a master, be very gentle. Now the next one is based on the Master Desk True Peak, which is made by Brainworks, and it's called the Master Desk Classic. Now, this has been out for a couple of years, and originally it was announced to be a free plugin for a limited time. And it's been 2 years, and it's still free. Okay, so I just recently put my hands on this one to check it out. So it's kind of a all-in-one mastering plugin. Well, you'll be able to adjust a bit of the loudness, some tone shaping also, and a bit of harmonic distortion. And it's pretty well done, actually, you know. So there's the volume knob, which is gonna bring more loudness to the signal with, I guess, some compression under the hood with maybe a blend of limiting also. There's the choice between hard compression or soft compression. There's also a stereo imager within the plugin, so you can enhance the stereo image of the master if needed. And it actually sounds pretty good, I have to say. There's the tone. You know, you can add a bit more brightness or decrease the amount of brightness with the tone knob. Foundation is going to work on the low frequencies of the frequency range to add a bit more weight or reduce the amount of bass frequencies out of a master. THD will add some harmonic distortion to the sound, and everything is very subtle. Okay, so it's made for mastering, and again, in mastering, all moves are subtle moves. Usually. Okay, so this is the case for the harmonic distortion. It's going to add a bit more color to the entire sound, a bit more glue also. It's kind of cool. And then the output trim to set up the output level. And there's 4 choices when it comes to tone, which I think it's in a relation with the tone knob right here. I know that the B tone will have a resonance filter at around 300 Hertz and 3K. And same for D. D will only have a resonance filter at around 300 Hertz. So this tone knob will react differently, and a way will give you a different vibe, different sound, according to the tone switch that is engaged. the more I add volume, the more it's going to add compression, okay? So if I was to use it in a mastering session, I would probably be gentle with the volume knob, probably leave it at 0 and work with everything else and use this plugin as a tone box, basically. Now the next one on the list is a clipper. Clipping can be very useful when mastering, especially if you want to achieve louder masters. I'm going to use a clipper to, of course, shave the peaks of the master, and I'm very gentle when it comes to shaving those peaks, because the more you add clipping on a signal, the more distortion you'll end up with. Okay, so this is something to pay attention to. So we have the input gain, output gain, oversample up to 32 times, which is quite a lot. There's also a knee that you can shape, so you can put this clipper to a hard knee, or, you know, smooth up the knee. And then the ceiling point right on top. So this is basically what the clipper will do. Now, if you want me to do a video on the difference between clipping and limiting, let me know down below. Now, apart from EQ, another very important tool when mastering is a good limiter. Now, I have two limiters to show you that are 100% free. One is part of CUBASE Pro, and it's called Razor. And if you don't have CUBASE Pro, just bear with me a minute and I'll show you another option. Now, what I like about Razor, it's like a very effective brick wall type limiter. Very flexible as far as the release time goes, and I kind of like the aggressive mode, which I kind of like because it kind of keeps the punch of a master by using the aggressive release. It has also a true peak limiting by activating the detect inner sample clipping, which will use internal oversampling. Okay, let's have a listen. I'm going to engage compare. Okay, so the volume is going to stay down, so we'll be able to A/B test without being distracted by the change of volume. That's pretty cool. So it does the job pretty well for a stock plugin. Now, the other option I have here, if you don't have CUBASE Pro, is called Barricade. It's a compressor, but also a limiter. And I kind of like using the limiter side of the plugin. And this is what I'll do in this video. Now, this is a demo version, but the demo version is unlimited. Okay, so that's why I decided to include this plugin as a free plugin, because you can use indefinitely the free demo if you want to. The only thing is that you won't be able to save a preset of your own, but the full price of the plugin is like 29 euros or something, so it's pretty cheap. So if you want to put your hands on the full version, it's not going to cost you a lot. And it's not a bad thing to encourage small developers. Now, the cool thing about this one, it's a bit like the Pro L 2x Fab filter. It has a loudness metering system within the plugin itself. And it also has some flexibility on the attack time and release time. You can engage true peak for true peak limiting, and there's also dithering that is available straight within the plugin. So it does the job pretty well. So I kind of like this one for a free limiter. So that is your option if you don't have a good limiter in your DAW. And if you have CUBASE Pro and you work with Razor, that could be a good companion to Razor and use it together, you know, as dual limiters to achieve more transparent loudness. And this is a type of technique you can use to reach louder masters and keep them as transparent as possible. And talking about loudness, it's always good to have a good metering system, especially for loudness metering. The one I often use is called Supervision, and it's a CUBASE plugin. Very useful, great graphic analyzer plugin. It offers a lot, but what I like to use within Supervision when mastering is the loudness meter, which is going to give me the true peak level of the master, the integrated short-term momentary max LUFS reading, peak to loudness, which is always good to have a look at. So Supervision is one of my go-to metering plugin when it comes to mastering. So if you don't have access to Supervision, which again is a stock plugin out of CUBASE, there's a plugin called Ulean Loudness Meter 2, which is also a very good free plugin. And like Supervision does, it will give you the loudness metering of your master while you're mastering, which is again very useful, and I kind of like to have that in front of me when I'm mastering, especially to look at the short-term LUFS value. So it will give you all those loudness readings and also the true peak level of the song you're mastering. Again, 100% free. And on top of that, it's a good looking plugin. Now there's way more free plugins out there related to mastering. So if you know about other plugins that I did not mention in this video, please share them with me in the comment section below. Also check out this video if you want to know more about my dual limiter technique when mastering. Until next time, take care and see you.